Welcome to the second studio broadcast of Unbox, a digital event series where we invite leading brands and industry experts to dissect the challenges and the opportunities of building a leading brand in an ever-changing world. Unbox is also about finding new purposeful solutions together by joining in our conversation with industry experts where we explore and learn from shared experiences and insights. My name is Sabine van Gafke. I'm an international communications catalyst, moderator, and speaker, and I have the pleasure of navigating us through this hour going forward, where we're going to meet four knowledgeable experts to explore one of the biggest challenges and game changers ahead, and that is the transition to the circular economy, as we'll be talking around the theme how to create a sustainable business in a circular economy. Now, a shift to circularity is identified as a solution to global challenges, such as climate change and also biodiversity, by rethinking everything from product development, design, packaging to recycling systems. But how do we find a sustainable business model in a circular economy? And what can the packaging role play here? Well, these are some of the questions that we'll be diving into during today's agenda. And I'd also like to mention that you're welcome to send in comments and feedback, as we have experts from Holmen Iggesund here today who will be addressing these if you use the chat function in your browser. And with that, it's time for me to introduce our first guest for today. She has worked with sustainability issues for the last 30 years. She is a sustainability coach and also a communications expert. And over the last 5 years, she's also worked as Global Sustainability and Innovation Director for the premium brand Gant and its strategic sustainable strategy. And I'd like to say a warm welcome in the studio. I have Jessica Cederberg-Woltmar. A warm welcome.
Thank you so much. It's very good to be here, and it's interesting to hear us talking about circularity and the importance of that for all our businesses.
Definitely. And speaking of the business of the fashion industry, it's both an industry that is in an urgency of really remodeling itself on a sustainable journey, but also an industry where a lot of brands, Gant, for example, really are pioneering and paving the way for sustainability and circular strategies. Tell us briefly about Gant's journey here.
Yeah, for us, it's about keeping the profitability. We see that sustainability is a foundation for a continued profitability. And we also see that this is where we can do something, not because we have to, but because we want to and we can. And that's why we also believe that we can make a change here. But that's also where we see that we on a never stop learning journey, because sustainability you're never done with. So you're just continuing and working and taking step by step. And also, of course, then having a strategy to stand on and know the direction to go.
And I'd also like to look in, how do we define sustainability within fashion and circular economy and production, recycling?
Yeah, but I would say, like, for us, it starts with quality and durability. So this is like from the 1960s and 70s. So it was produced then. Of course, when it can withstand 300 washes and still look great, that's one way of looking at sustainability. When we look at a new thing, a new shirt, then, of course, we need to look into how it is produced, what kind of raw material, and make sure that we have sustainably sourced raw materials, and of course also the production. And then when we come to circularity, we also use the scraps. So from this we made a remake to take care of all the leftover scraps, but it's not plenty of them, so it's only 129 pieces, but it's still using them instead of just throwing it away or not using it.
And sort of looking at the challenges along the way, because even though Gant has been working on this for a few years, what do you see is sort of the challenges facing the fashion industry, and what sort of maybe new business models need to derive from this?
Yeah, I think that that's super important when it comes to circularity, that when it comes to that, like we have rent, we have repair, we have refresh, recycle, and reuse, and all of those. It's not about all of them being profitable from the beginning. It's good for us as a complete brand and looking at the business overall. But of course, when we know that some of these things we will have to pay for until the consumers are there and ready to do this. And it's also important to remember that looking at the consumers, we need to help them to do this in a fun, easy way, so that circularity is something that we need to work on as a company, but without the consumers, we will never have the closed loop.
And a bit talking about the consumers, because it seems like, you know, in this day and age, we also have more aware consumers who are more conscious, who are also choosing brands according to their sustainable strategy. Do you find that having a sustainable and circular strategy is imperative for brands today and going forward out of a customer perspective?
Yeah, but I believe that we need to have that, and we have 7 strategies because I don't believe that you can have just one. So we have circularity, we have water, we have climate, and of course we have about making sure that it's transparent and also all of those things. But they all go together. But here is where again it comes back to the consumers. They are not interested in a strategy. They are interested in having something that is good looking, that has the durability and quality, and then they want to know that it's made with sustainability in the mindset, and that we can give them, but it's always something that you need to improve along the way. And sustainability is about everything from planet, water, people, and of course product, and of course also about ethics.
And speaking of ethics, I'm also thinking, I mean, consumers are aware, but isn't there also necessity for sort of a behavioral change? Because it's one thing as a consumer wanting to be sustainable and demanding a company to be it, but then it also implies that consumers need to adapt a bit. How have you sort of perceived that?
Yeah. And I absolutely believe that you're completely head on here. And that's really something that all of us need to take into consideration. And that's why we created the 7 rules. But that's actually, in reality, EU's waste hierarchy. And that's super boring for the consumers. If I tell them like, okay, we're working according to EU's waste hierarchy and circularity, then they will go like, oh, I'm not interested. But when we talk about how you refresh something, that we have a lifelong repair on the jeans, or that we can recycle in the store, or that you can have the remake shirt or whatever it is, then you get that engagement and you help them. And I believe that that is what we need to help them to make easier and more sustainable choices. But we, of course, need to start cleaning and doing everything that we can do for continue every step on the way.
And looking at the journey for Gant, and also if you could share some of the biggest insights that you've had along this journey when it comes to really transitioning to a circular economy or strategy.
Yeah, I would say that one of the challenges, of course, is we launched before COVID came. And all of these we're a premium brand. We wanted the premium experience, many times that premium experience 1-to-1 in a store, touching and feeling the products. So I have to honestly say that we missed out the digital thing where you can have all of these online as well. We had it there, but it was more in the background. Of course, with all the stores being shut at one period of the time globally, then that's not a workable strategy. So that one you need to really do. One of the key other things that I took with me already from the beginning was that this needs to be one team, one Gant. It's not about the sustainability or innovation team that I'm leading. It's about everybody from top to the consumers. And it's about also taking on partners in this, because you can't do this alone. Then you're very alone and very small. But if you reach out to the right strategic partners, you can create a bigger change faster. And if there's something we still have a very limited amount of, is time to get things working in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, it's definitely about a lot of collaboration. And I want to dive deeper into that and also introduce another guest to talk more about that. But before we do, let's have a look at an explanatory film about circular economy. And with that, I'd like to invite our next speaker, who is an expert on design thinking out of a circular perspective. Elodie Traîneau is an industrial designer, an engineer, an expert in materials, and also the co-founder of the consultancy company Hilo, that is a global collective of designers, engineers, and strategies who are making a positive impact through the application of material, processes, and circular thinking. So joining us via link from Paris, I say a warm welcome, Elodie.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here with you. Strangely with this technical things, but I'm there.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I also have Jessica here in the studio talking about Gant and their sustainability strategy. And I just wanted to sort of, if you've listened in, do you have any reflections on the conversation and about sort of the transition to the circular and sustainable strategies?
Well, most of the essential things about circular economy have already been said in a way. I mean, I think that you've pointing that most of the things that need to be done and that are expected. What I think is interesting when you discuss with brands such as Gantt is that well, brand owners are like in one of the best positions to push on both ends, like. From the beginning of a supply chain to the end, meaning the consumers. So it's a perfect position to be very influential, and that's key. Mm-hmm. So on one end, it's great because you can do many things. On the other, it's a lot of responsibility, of course, because it's kind of like it's put on your shoulders. And what I think is very interesting is that you can see when you ask people that they are very willing to change their behavior. They are very willing to act, but they most of the time don't know how. So back to the brands to kind of like point them out what they could do. So there is a very a big educational issue here, so that collectively we all, because we are all consumers, even if you are a brand owner, you're also a consumer, so that the level of knowledge is raised. And I think that's key. The more we know, the more efficient we'll be, I think.
And that's also interesting because the aspect of education and also this collaborative process that I think you, Jessica, also concluded with before we looked at the film is that the necessity that all stakeholders, I mean, in the whole supply chain really have a collaborative approach more than ever, maybe. And I'm thinking, Elodie, with your experience, both working with brands and companies and so forth, how do you see sort of the change from the demands from clients and partners and suppliers trying to transition into becoming more circular and sustainable?
Definitely, we've noticed a change. I mean, I've been working in the material world for almost 25 years now, and it started with, can you find me a material that is more performing or that looks great? So it was either a technical issue or an aesthetical or both. And the last 5 years, it has become find me a more sustainable material. What is funny is that in that regard, well, this idea of finding sustainable material is tricky because we don't think they exist. So like you don't have the shelf where the so-called sustainable materials are waiting for you. It's more a question of like a context, and you have to think constantly in terms of life cycles, in terms of what the material is gonna do exactly for you. But back to this idea of change is like really we've seen things evolve, and now there is definitely a will for doing better. One of the question being exactly why, as Jessica was saying, it's also because we want to, and I think that the brands that are definitely wanting to, it shows, or it should show at least. And what is very interesting is that what I've seen changing as well is this idea of imperfection. A lot of brands used to claim they were the best in the world at this or that. And sustainability issues could be included in that. Like, we are the best in being sustainable. My product is the most sustainable on the market and stuff like that. I think this is starting to disappear as a way of presenting things. And that imperfection, transparency being the key, being the new green, you need to admit that you are not perfect. And customers, they love that because they are not perfect themselves and they know it. So I think that showing your weakness in the sustainability, circular economy world is quite a mark of humility, but also honesty, and that works very well.
Can I just add there that when it comes to this, like sustainability is super complex, and we have all of these different aspects that you need to look into. And of course, it's complicated, but it's not impossible. And that's also a mindset that you need to have. But I also believe that, like you said, Eloise, is that this is also where we need to help out together. And this is, again, it's a never stop learning. We all need to learn more. And that's why we need experts like you to tell us this is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. And that's also where you need to do that. And you need to again, look at what can you do. And also that's a challenge when you're working with different materials, because sometimes you think that circularity is it's just about reusing or recycling and everything works the same way. It absolutely doesn't.
Very valid point. And I was also thinking, Elodie, if we could elaborate more around the sort of circular design thinking and the concept of that.
Yeah, well, as it has been said, circularity is this idea of like looping the loop. Again, always constantly thinking of in terms of life cycles. So this like circular thing is definitely the key. And when you think about it, right now our economy, as it was pointed out in the film, is just a linear economy. So we make, and then it's waste. The idea here is to loop the loop. So thinking that way, when you know that things have to go back somewhere, it's not necessarily within the same loop, by the way, you can like join another loop, then the design is definitely affected, or I mean, the way you think may be a bit different. And then I think what is the most important is thinking in terms of system, ecosystems, and thinking holistically, just as you pointed out, Jessica, as well. As this is just a very big thing to embrace. But you have to think for disassembly, you have to think for recycling, which strangely enough is very entertained as an option, but it's not the best one when you think circular, because in fact recycling uses a lot of energy. Exactly. and pushes you to go back in the loop way up. So it's much better to try to maintain, repair, refill, remanufacture, redo. So you have a lot of R words that you can play with. But this is, this idea of like, okay, and this is what is challenging, I think. And as a designer myself, it's just like I'm constantly exercising the what if, why not? And circular economy is just like the perfect playground, because what if we were to do things differently? Why not? And that's like an open field to do that.
And it also boils down a bit to the narrative of education, also around the narrative. Like you say, recycling has been a lot the narrative, but maybe it's more reusing. I mean, there's a balance between what is actually sustainable.
Yeah, but there again, we come back to the education, not just for our consumers, but within the industry, within the decision makers, and all of them needs to understand that like recycling is not always the best. You need to give a garment a third and a fourth life before it ends up into something else. And of course, then you need to start with the design. And as I said, for us, it starts with quality, because it needs to have that durability and long lasting, because otherwise, what's the point in putting all the other efforts in if it's just like trash after a couple of washes? That's also where like you need to think about where you start and where you want to continue, because it's not the end, it's the continuous that you need to think about.
Sort of the short and long-term thinking in one.
Yeah, so we say from dirt to shirt and beyond, But it needs that. It needs all of that thinking together. And that's also, again, why a strategy is super important to have, because that's the foundation. And you really need to have a long-term goal there so that you can just like tweak. You don't want 90 degrees shift. So that's also why it's important to be in contact with the real experts to say like this can be done or that can be done. And also where you learn from other industries. Because I would like to say that looking at the paper industry, they have been super advanced and ahead. And also it's interesting to see they have a renewable source and they still work. They could just say it's renewable, so why bother? But they don't. And I like that spirit.
That mindset. And Elodie, just to summarize, so Hilo is a global consultancy company, and you have sort of different stakeholders from scientists, designers, and so forth. In that, what do you, out of your experience, if we look forward 2 to 5 years, what are sort of the trends when it comes to materials, when it comes to sustainable choices, manufacturing, and so forth? What do you see there?
It's always difficult to be to predict the future, definitely. But what I see is maybe going low tech and more reasonable and more local, more inspired by nature. But it has always been a trend in a way, of course. But I think that the sustainability issues are pointing out that the way we do things today, especially aesthetically in many fields, we've gone a bit overboard. We've let ourselves go in terms of like choices of materials, effects, and it uses so much matter that if you want to be more sustainable at some point with the same aesthetic, you're hitting the ceiling because you can't do miracles, and the improvement, reducing your environmental impacts, is not possible anymore unless you change the way things look. Because it requires deeper changes. So one of the big question we have right now with the brands that we are working with is that, can you keep on looking the way you look like now and be really less impactful? I'm kind of doubtful, and this is going to bring new aesthetical codes to the table, and I think that this will leave the room for materials and designs to be going back to the sense of the materials, their raw state, things that are closer to the reality and not coated by artificial stuff. So yeah, that could be a trend. But you could also argue the contrary, and you could tell me that going very, very technical, very performing could also save energy. So it's so complicated. Yes, you have so many possibilities that are there. The key thing is to evaluate, to make sure that when you choose something, it is the less worse choice, not to say the best, because there aren't that many best choices, but it's really like how to arbitrate what to select, and it goes back to the strategy that you would have. What do you defend? What do you stand for as a brand, as a manufacturer? And this will help you choose, because there is no miracle solution.
Can I just add there that when I look at trends and see what the future holds, I think that one of the key things is the streamlining of communication, as we spoke about before. Because here is where everybody can say that something is sustainable, and there is no way of telling that. But we know that it's coming legislation, and we also know that this is where consumers want to see something that is more similar. And like today, sustainability is all over the place. It's a fantastic thing because everything fits under it, but it also here is where we all together needs to take the responsibility and again, educate everyone, and of course also educate ourselves together, not one by one, but together to have a similarity here. Still enough room for individual how it looks, but still when it comes to this, I think it will be forced down a more streamlined way.
So the transition also from silos to a more collaborative way of working. Thank you so much, Elodie. Thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing your knowledge, wisdom and insights, and for all the great work that you do. Stay safe and healthy, both of you. And we're talking about sort of the demands that businesses and customers are putting on brands across industries to become more sustainable. But it's not only them. There are also now EU directives that are really concrete demands on all industries. So let's take a look at a short explanatory film on the EU directives aimed at the packaging industry. And as we saw in this film, the government regulations such as the European Green Deal and consumer demands are now pushing brands across all industries to really rethink every process from product development, design, packaging to the recycling systems. And the challenge now is to look at how do we make the recyclable process and also the packaging process more sustainable. To talk more about this, I'm now going to be joined in the studio by Jon Haag, who is Chief Circular Officer at And Repeat, a Swedish circular startup company striving to make the world more circular with a platform made for takeaway packaging, supporting all stakeholders in the value cycle for takeaway goods and on-the-go goods. And I actually wanted to see first, I mean, you've been listening into the conversation that I had with Jessica from Gant and also Elodie from Hilo. Any reflections on that conversation?
Yeah, I think it's a very good frame for everything that they speak about sustainability and circularity being such a wide question. And I think what we heard a little bit earlier and what we know today is that this is nothing that will happen in silos. So you need to work with competitors, you need to work within your industry, and you must make it almost a CEO question, because that's the way to come out of silos. And that, I was glad to hear that.
But do you find, I mean, out of your experience, that is actually something that the industries, the CEOs and the brands really understand? Because going from that sort of silo perspective to this collaborative perspective.
I think so, because sometimes I say that we first had sustainability 1.0, and then it was, let's talk about sustainability. And you had it in your annual report and everything, just to have the checkbox ticked. And then 2.0 was that you actually start working with it and make it your unique selling point. So you try to be better than competitors. And now it's starting to become part of your DNA or your business model. And then it's actually top of the agenda. It is in the executive management team to decide and discuss.
And tell us a bit more about And Repeat, because what you're actually doing is also, navigating and facilitating this path for brands and companies to actually, move more towards sustainable and circular economy.
Yeah, packaging and food packaging is super important, and it's growing and growing, and it will probably continue doing that globally. And then we have some scapegoats, you could say, and takeaway and single-use packaging is one of them. And they are normally very good quality. So you have very fine plastics, you have very fine carton fibers, and so on. And still they are recycled the least among packaging. So here we see that we need something to incentivize all kind of stakeholders in the value cycle to do something better. So we have a deposit scheme, a digital platform, and we also collaborate in the physical world to make this better than for takeaway packaging. So we have a deposit for takeaway food packaging, and then you get credits back when you sort it right. And then we also track the material so we know how much that actually will be recycled into material again.
And looking at the movie also indicated, we have 2030 and where we, have to be totally circular, sustainable and using renewable energy and all of that. What do you find are the sort of biggest barriers towards creating a more circular economy today and going forward?
Yep, I think from a material perspective, I think one of the biggest barriers is that we have to down prioritize efficiency a little bit. Because if we're going to transition ourselves from a linear economy to a circular one, everything can't be as efficient as it has been in the value chain that was a linear, straightforward business. Because everyone have practiced for 10 years, 50 years, 100 years to be super, super efficient. So we need to prioritize value retention on material much higher for a while. And then when we have learned that, then we can be efficient again. From a circular economy point of view, I think one of the biggest challenges might be that going from that straight line to the circle costs a little bit more than most people think, because we have to rethink a lot of systems that is designed and purposed for an old way of doing things.
And do you find, because we've also spoken a lot about that, there needs to be all the stakeholders sort of around the table, because you have the producers, you have the brands, you have the regulatory processes, you have technology that is accelerating when it comes to innovation. How do we sort of, are these in balance, or how do we sort of balance that synergy?
Hard to answer, I think. We always, in each industry, in each segment, you have some front runners, always. It could be in mobile phones, it could be in fashion, as we heard earlier today, and it can be in packaging, of course, and consumer packaged goods. So what we have had for a time now, I think, is some brands that actually wanted to do more than maybe the suppliers are ready to give them. But now they have understand that when we talk about circularity, and we need to look even at take-back systems, the reuse models, better recycling, the big brands can never fix that themselves in each country where they operate. So now they actually start sitting down together with both suppliers and competitors. And then we will see much more happen.
And also a thing that was mentioned in the movie that, you know, we're seeing more packaging than ever, especially with e-commerce and everything happening. How do we approach this? I mean, just out of your perspective, what are sort of the hands-on solutions for this? If there are any, I mean, just out of your expertise.
If there are any. Yeah, I mean, you need to make it easy for the consumers to feel that they do the right thing. So incentivize, as we do at Unrepeat, for example, can be a very good way. If you can harmonize, so you do about the same at the office, at the restaurant, at home, when you go to a foreign country, then you know that you always do the right thing. And then, of course, it should be convenient and feel a bit purposeful. So maybe you have to get some feedback that your contribution is helping. And that we might haven't seen so much of until today, maybe. Now we have annual reports, or some organization in each country try to report if we are doing better in recycling or circularity. We have those circular gap reports showing if we are getting better or worse. So there are some feedback coming into the system, which I think we really need.
And I guess that's sort of the process of both looking at how do we gear forward, but how do we also, because another thing that came to mind was, it seems like the cycle of reusing products was maybe more prone many decades ago, but is it sort of coming back? Is that mindset and that behavioral mind shift coming more and more now in different business models?
Yes, and I think efficiency have destroyed some good reuse models from before. Plastic have destroyed some good reuse models from before, because we had milk bottles. We actually take back glass bottles in most countries in Europe, and we wash them and use them again. But now you hear that when you throw the bottle in the recycling bin, so you know it's going to be a glass bottle again, but through energy and everything. So we can look back maybe to, I wouldn't say World War II, but by then, 50, 70 years ago, we had things that might work today, but we then maybe have to start without the best efficiency, as I mentioned before, first.
Efficiency is here key. A lesser efficiency and then driving it forward. I really want to continue the conversation. I just want to introduce our last guest of today, Johan Granås, who is Head of Sustainability at Holmen Iggesund, who is joining us via link. Hello, Johan. Happy to have you with us.
Hi, guys. Yeah, thanks a lot.
I wanted to start off, I'm sure you've listened to the conversations we've had today with both Elodie, Jessica and Jon. I just wanted to hear any reflections from your side on what's been said.
Well, Jon just talked about this with efficiency, and that I can only subscribe to. That packaging efficiency is one of the main drivers we have had in our industry, but maybe we haven't really paid enough attention to the later stages of the use of our product in terms of recycling or circularity. So I absolutely see that there's been a big push for efficiency. So that's something that I absolutely agree on. And then Elodie touched on something that also is kind of interesting, that how we're not perfect and how that's an important aspect. I mean, we have been around. I mean, our company has been around since 1685, and I promise you that in the course of that time, there are a lot of things that has not been perfect and things that we need to sort of take care of and looking forward to do better.
But tell us a bit about the sustainability strategies and journey that Holmen Iggesund, has done and is doing.
Well, I mean, we have a really good starting point where we have a renewable raw material. We're using only renewable energy to produce our products, and the product is very easy to recycle. So we have a really good starting point. But absolutely, I mean, we have our challenges in our industry or in our company as anywhere else. We need to continue to work on reducing fossil fuels or products of fossil origin and so on. And we need to basically everywhere from the seedlings in the forest over to transport. I mean, transport is something that is super difficult for us today to try to get circular. So of course we have a good starting point, and I think our industry or fiber-based packaging has a good starting point, but we absolutely have our challenges as well.
Jon, any reflection on that?
Yeah, I think it's very good that you lift the point of imperfectness, and I think it's fun today because when we talk about the big brands that want to be better and better, they 5-10 years ago, when they wanted to be really disruptive or innovative, they looked at material and design of packaging. But maybe today, to be disruptive, you should look at the system. So how do I manage transportation? How do I manage a recycling system? Or how can I create a demand for my material in the second life? And I think that's what we start seeing now. It's making it much more interesting, and it's broadened the scope for any material producer.
Johan, do you see that as well? I mean, Holmen Iggesund, you work with premium brands around the world, and I've also understood that they also travel to you to sort of, they're getting more interested in the whole sort of supply chain and also from the packaging process. What do you find? Are customers getting more conscious? Are they sort of really trying to educate themselves as well, in addition to being sustainable?
Absolutely. I think that a lot of the brands that we are working with are beefing up their sustainability departments year by year or month by month even. So, which means that there are lots more discussions, the questions are more detailed and so on, which of course we welcome. I mean, it's easier to develop that way if you have a speaking partner that you can sort of develop together these things. So absolutely, I see a growing interest, and I see also a growing interest in our sort of specifics around our product and processes, where we have a lot of people that are interested to come and see for themselves. I mean, our process is, in one way, it's pretty easy to understand. You take wood and you dissolve it in water and you add some energy and then you can make paper. So it's not that complicated. But on the other hand, in the type of industrial scale we do it, it is, I mean, you want to see for yourself to make sure that you can sort of feel trust or confidence in your packaging material. And that's something a lot of companies are doing. Jessica from Gant, for example, is kind of interesting that Gant visited us in Iggesund in 2010. I had to look it up. It was in February 2010 they were visiting, and so I think it is growing, and it is something that I hope we will see more of.
And sort of looking more into that, and maybe out of a customer perspective, I'm thinking, Jon, how can we help customers, really make sustainable choices? I mean, education is one, but what are sort of the key tasks that brands and industry should think about?
Well, probably it's many things, because circularity and sustainability is quite complex. but to make it easy for consumers. So maybe, as we do, incentivize them to do right. Can we help harmonize? So you do things like maybe purchase, maybe recycling or reuse models that are similar at home, at my office, when I'm traveling, and give feedback, which I think might be the weakest point today, that you don't really, as a consumer, get feedback like, hey, you did a good choice. But maybe we start needing that. And it's probably more possible today with digitalization and everything than it was 20 years ago or even before this. So nudging, feedback, and some kind of here and now incentives, I think could help a lot.
Johan, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I think it's completely right. Working on systems and working on a more holistic approach, I think in general is important, and that means also stretching out through your supply chain, both up and downstream, is really important, so that you can sort of help each other or design in a good way, or feedback things that comes from recycling, feed that back upstream again to become new products and so on. So absolutely.
And I'm thinking also, so that's the customer perspective, because it's also, you have the regulatory perspectives as well. We look at EU has the Agenda 2030. How do you have any sort of incentives, both from your expertise, but maybe also representing the industry, to the regulatory process, politicians and so forth? What is there something that needs to be done to really facilitate this transition to a circular economy and mindset?
If I might start, we know now that there have been a lot of new levels for this is like the true recycling levels that we need to reach for different materials. So it's one for plastic, it's another one for paper-based materials, and another one for metals. And we're also actually shifting measuring points. So what we have been reporting and maybe bragging about before has been collection rate, but now we're going to report true recycling rate. What kind of material has become material again? So that's a big shift where things might be seeing a little bit worse than people have thought. So that will be a struggle, but it's pushing also the industry, because everyone needs to show that we are aiming for that 2025 and 2030 target. So, for example, if we take paper industry, probably among the best in the class, we have a collection rate which is almost 80%, but the true recycling rate into material again might be a little bit lower, like 2/3 of all material, but it's still 5 times better than plastic packaging, for example.
Different perspectives, yeah. Johan, anything to add to that?
Well, maybe it's a little bit outside of this discussion, but I think something that needs to change for the whole of sustainability is that the true price of carbon dioxide emitted needs to be applied, and I think that can't be done in any other way than from regulatory things. I think that there are too many. I don't think that we are paying the true price of emitting carbon dioxide, and I think that needs to be implemented also in packaging and in other areas as well. And that would really change, I think, a lot, and we're getting there, but step by step.
And also what I think was good to hear, both from Elodie and from Jessica today, and now from you, that when we have those big brands and those like coalitions of companies that want to do something better together, then we can actually probably also see a little bit more funding than from EU Green Deal, because EU and the member countries, they have been a little bit afraid of favorizing or putting someone on a pedestal, which might misfortune others. But if you get together and want to show progress, then you can also get funding for it. So that's also very positive.
And once again, sort of summing it all up, that collaborative approach across industries, across borders, and within industries as well is so important today, not being in silos, but really going together and creating solutions for the better together. And Johan, just to summarize, any reflections or any key takeaways that you'd like to leave with the audience today?
I think this is an important discussion. I think that packaging can contribute a lot. I mean, there's lots of packaging in the world today. I think we probably need more packaging to safeguard products. I mean, we all know about problems with food waste and so on, but that makes it even more important that to think about the packaging systems, to look at your packaging needs and how you could and sort of dare to reflect on what should we do, how should this be sourced, and what kind of packaging, well, if I call it system or packaging material, should we endorse. I think that question among brand owners is being asked more and more and needs to be asked even more in the future.
Thank you so much, Jon, for sharing your knowledge and expertise. And also, Johan, thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise. Stay safe and healthy, both of you. And I, of course, want to extend a thank you to all of our guests who are here today, sharing their knowledge, their learnings. And hopefully it's been beneficial and also relevant to all of our viewers. So with that, I want to say thank you for joining us today for the second episode of Unbox. We always appreciate your reflections and your feedback. So please do send these to us using the comment section in your browser. And you can find the interviews with all of our guests today on iggesund.com, and feel free, of course, to also contact Iggesund's experts if you wish a private consultation at any time. I'd also like to add that you can download Iggesund's published guide. They're called Deep Dives, and they can help you and guide you to learn more about the work with packaging. And these deep dives this time evolve around three themes. It's the driving forces behind circularity, it's designed for circularity, and it's also transparency and sourcing. And to access the deep dives, go to iggesund.com and you'll learn more about that. And just to tell you, we're already working on the next episode of Unbox, and we really look forward to inviting you all back to the third edition of Unbox. In the meantime, feel free to follow us on LinkedIn and also to subscribe to our newsletter at iggesund.com. And with that, I want to say thank you for watching and stay safe and healthy.